Yes, hello, folks. Phil here from Beyond the Pits, and absolutely delighted to be joined here, as always, on our Monday show, the fantastic Danny Higginbotham on BTP here. Just myself today, no Ian. So me and Danny will be flying solo. Danny, how's things, mate?
Very good, thanks, mate. Yourself?
Yes, not too bad. All good, mate. Another excellent weekend for Manchester United, of course,
Yeah.
with the win against Reading. FA Cup taking on a very, very strange appearance. We'll get into that today. A couple of other
hmm
topics we'll get into. Thanks for all the tweets from all the listeners or all the viewers.
Yeah.
Wingers in the Premier League, we'll address that. We'll get into will history be kind to Wayne Rooney and how it views him. I'm interested to get your views on that, Danny. Guardiola, does he have the face of a man that has regrets with what's going on at Manchester City? Does he look at that Manchester City job and say, I made a big mistake here? We'll talk about that and expand on World Cup as well. But Danny, first of all, want to get into the Wayne Rooney discussion
hmm
because Wayne Rooney broke the record this week, or tied the record with Bobby
Yeah.
Charlton, 249 goals, which was just it's an incredible achievement. When United
Yeah.
signed Wayne Rooney back, what was it, 2003,
Yeah.
uh, broke the record for a teenager, magnificent young player. You would have taken that back then and said, if he goes on to break the record, he will have been an exceptional signing. But as someone that's watched United forensically over the years and watched Rooney's career, I still can't help but feel that as great as this achievement has been, it's still Wayne Rooney still left a bit on the table.
Yeah. Oof.
Yeah, I do. I think when I saw him as a teenager, Danny, at 18 in the
Yeah.
Euros, that was the best teenager I've ever seen. And I
Yeah.
think at 24, after the Champions League final in Russia, in Moscow, Rooney's career dipped. Rooney never hit those heights again. In fact, at 26, 27, he had contract issues at Manchester United. And if you look at his career statistically, it went downhill. For me, he peaked at 24, and maybe that's because he had so much football. Maybe it's because he didn't look after
Mm.
himself. But to me, we should be talking about Wayne Rooney today in the same breath as a Cristiano Ronaldo. Only Rooney didn't apply himself to the same degree, I think.
I, I think obviously a lot of people will say that, but I think he's a completely different player as well.
Of course.
Regardless, if we talk about people will say that Wayne Rooney could have done more. Personally, I wouldn't agree with that. I think Wayne Rooney and Ronaldo. Ronaldo is a player that's very pleasing on the eye on the football pitch. You know, the things that he can
Mm-hmm.
do with the ball, and you know, very very much like a Messi. What he can do with the ball, people like myself can just look at it and can only dream about things like that. And I think because of Wayne Rooney, because of the type of player that he is, it's not pleasing on the eye. So therefore, that's why a lot of people will not put him up there in that bracket with a Cristiano Ronaldo, a Lionel Messi. And I would say that them two are on the next level to Wayne Rooney, no doubt about it. But Wayne Rooney is a completely different player. From my point of view, I think it's phenomenal what he's done, is in terms of the amount of goals that he's scored to be equal now with the great legendary Sir Bobby Charlton. Is unbelievable in my mind. He's going to beat that record. He's going to be
Sure.
Manchester United's all-time top goal scorer, and it will never be beaten.
All right.
I will guarantee that record will never be beaten.
Take a look at Ferguson's criticisms of Wayne Rooney over the years. Now, you can argue some of this was personal or whatever, whether it was legitimate or not. One of the biggest criticisms of Ferguson had with Rooney was his fitness, and said that when England gave Wayne Rooney 2 weeks off before the South Africa World Cup, he apparently told them, absolutely do not do that. If you give Rooney time off, it takes him 3-4 games to find his form again. You can't give him time off, which is why I feel Rooney coming in from off the bench at United is just not a good situation. He's a guy that needs to play. He's a guy that puts on weight easily. He's and he's admitted this himself. Has Wayne Rooney and the way we've seen the pictures, Danny, we all know the problems that Rooney has off the field. Has that had a negative impact on his career?
I think it's probably had a negative impact as in terms of how he's perceived by the public, but I don't think it's had a negative effect on his career. Listen, I've played against Wayne Rooney, and for me, he's an outstanding player. He is a Manchester United legend, and I will argue with anybody that disagrees with that, because I'd like to know why he isn't. But the one thing I would say about him is, if you look at other players, there's been other players that I have played with that don't have the ability of Wayne Rooney, but have the body shape. Okay, so therefore, people say, well, if he has 2 weeks off, that means that people sometimes think, oh, well, is he going to have 2 weeks off, and that means he's going to live unhealthy for them 2 weeks? It's nothing to do with that. It's his body shape. It's the way that he is. Somebody like me, for example, if I had 2 weeks off and did exactly what Wayne Rooney did, I wouldn't put on any weight. That's just my body shape. That's how I am. That's my metabolism and everything. But because everybody looks at Wayne Rooney and says, okay, he's had a couple of weeks off and maybe he's put a little bit of weight, and automatically they think the negative side of things. They think, oh, he's been doing this, he's been doing that, when in all reality, he quite possibly might not have been doing that. And I just think that one of the things we do in this country, we saw it with David Beckham. We've seen it with quite a number of players over the years, is that we big these players up and we put them on a pedestal as quite rightly outstanding England players that go down in history. But then when they get to that level and everybody sees how great they are, people can't wait to knock them down. And that's the one thing, in my opinion, that becomes very frustrating. We've seen it in different circumstances. So, for example, it's a completely different situation, but Giroud, everyone around the world has seen the goal that he scored recently against Crystal Palace. People were still picking holes in that. Oh, he didn't mean that. He couldn't have meant that, because that's not the type of player that he is. And I'm like, hang on a second. Regardless of whether he's that type of player or not, let's take a step back and let's admire it for what it is. And that's unfortunately what we seem to do as supporters of football teams. Can we pick a fault in somebody instead of going, this is Wayne Rooney, who has been at Manchester United for 12, 13 years now, and up until recently was the first name on the team sheet more often than not. To do that alone, then that's quite remarkable. At Manchester United, to be one of the first names on the team sheet for 10, 11 years of his duration at the football club. That for me is incredible, and that is enough to give you legendary status, because there's not many players. Because
players have a very different view of Wayne Rooney than what fans do, right? A lot of United fans are quite cynical towards him. A lot of players are very defensive over him. There's a couple of questions about Rooney. Did he shine at a tournament after Euro 2004? Did he turn it on? Did he show up for England at a World Cup or European Championships after that? Did he leave his mark on a tournament? I would have to say no. All right, we'll go to that one first. Go ahead. Did he?
You know what I'm gonna. Okay, who are the two best players in the world?
Ronaldo and Messi.
Okay. Have any of them shone at Euros, at a World Cup?
Ronaldo just did it. You would have.
Did he shine? He did. He won it. But that's everybody's. Which is another ridiculous thing. People have thrown it out at Messi that if he doesn't win the World Cup with Argentina, then he can never be mentioned in the same breath as Maradona. Now, that for me is ridiculous, because you are playing in different teams, different strengths of the teams of the national team when they go into individual tournaments. So, okay, you talk about Wayne Rooney as in terms of, I think it was 2004, wasn't it, when he was absolutely outstanding for England.
Yeah.
How many tournaments have England actually showed up at since then? So to blame that on an individual, or to say that has he done it on the world stage for his international team, you could probably say that about a lot of players from a lot of different nations, but it doesn't make them not world class or individual magnificent players.
Yeah, I'm sure you could say about Steven Gerrard as well, Paul, maybe even Scholes, Lampard, lads of players. All right, the other question is, with you said something there, Danny, about name on the team sheet.
Yeah.
he's not first name on the team sheet anymore.
No.
If you were Jose Mourinho, would you end his career at United?
What do you mean, is in terms
I mean,
of
would you
come the summer?
would you say we've seen the best here? United are better without Wayne Rooney. Let's move them on.
It's a possibility. I think the thing is, for me, is that I look at Wayne Rooney, and he's having to do now what a lot of great players have had to do over the years, which is change the way that they play the game. You know, there's been I can remember on numerous occasions playing against him when he was at Manchester United. And Manchester United might not be playing that well, but he's grabbed the game by the scruff of the neck. And he's led them in the direction to go and win the game, whether that be playing against teams that I've been involved with when I played against Manchester United, or even watching them as a supporter over the years. The problem that Wayne Rooney has now is that if you're going to play effectively, it's a 4-3-3 now that Mourinho's playing at Manchester United. Where does he fit in? Are you going to put him ahead of Ibrahimovic? The answer to that is no. The wide players either side of Ibrahimovic, they're either players that are blessed with pace or players that are very cute and clever on the ball. Example, Juan Mata. The two that are playing then either side of Michael Carrick are your box-to-box players. Is Wayne Rooney that? You don't know. I don't think he's a box-to-box player. So that therein is the problem with Wayne Rooney. I think at the moment, with the way that Manchester United are playing and the system that they play, Wayne Rooney has one position that he can play in, which is the figurehead in a 4-3-3 as your centre forward. But we've seen with Ibrahimovic, you know, he's the one that suits that system better than anybody there.
All right. Lastly, on the Rooney question, one of the things that is often held against Wayne Rooney is his transfer request and the fact that he wanted to go to City. Dennis Law played for City, and it's never held against Dennis Law. And you rightfully brought this up before we started the show, and I forgot about that. Dennis Law is considered one of the Holy Trinity, and his time at Man City is very rarely ever mentioned, with, of course, the exception of the back heel goal. So is it fair that Wayne Rooney has this held against him?
I think in time, I don't think he will. I think a lot of people looked at it and said, well, he's just wanting to leave for the money. In my mind, there's two ways of looking at it. Is that a lot of people are saying that he wanted to leave because he was going to get more money at Manchester City. Or it could have been, look at it the other way, you know, and playing devil's advocate, is saying that he was doing that at the football club because he wanted more players to come to the football club. He wanted promises that players were going to come to the football club. And I think after that, certain players did. But at the end of the day, he didn't leave Manchester United. Dennis Law, as you quite rightly say, legendary player. You know, unfortunately, I'm too young to have seen him in the flesh, but I saw enough games to understand that he was a phenomenal player for Manchester United in an era where there was some real characters, you know, the likes of Sir Bobby Charlton, George Best, Dennis Law. So therefore, it's not held against him, and rightly so. And maybe it's held against Wayne Rooney at the moment by certain supporters. But I think as time goes by, I always believe that some players are not appreciated until their career comes to an end at that certain football club. Then they go. And then you look back in 5 or 10 years and go, wow, he was some player to be at this football club for as long as he was, to score the goals that he scored, to become the record goal scorer of Manchester United. And look at the players that Manchester United have had over the years. So therefore, yes, I'm sure it is held against him. But I think in the long run, I think people will take a step back when he's left the football club and realise and appreciate that he was one of a kind, and he's been a magnificent servant to Manchester United Football Club.
All right, we'll leave it there on Rooney. Danny, you wrote an article, of course, this week, which I want to get into, which was about teams that are playing kids in the FA Cup. I remember when United had to go to the 1999 World Club Cup final, 2000 World Club Cup final, and there was a massive uproar over United supposedly disrespecting the competition. There was a suggestion at that time, maybe you could play kids, and Ferguson, of course, didn't want to do that. That was considered incredibly disrespectful. It almost went unnoticed this weekend that loads of teams played kids. I've very rarely seen anything beyond what you said. What's your take on this?
I think it's circumstances. I think I was fortunate enough. I actually went out to Brazil in that tournament with Manchester United, and there was a huge thing made about it, that, you know, Manchester United going out of the FA Cup and going over to Brazil. But where I stand with it, people have made a big thing about Liverpool, as in terms of playing a lot of youngsters. For me, that's not an issue when it comes to Liverpool Football Club, because the way I look at it is the column that I wrote was talking about clubs that are struggling in the Premier League, treading water, so to speak, and winning very few games. And it's something that can kickstart your season. So, for example, 2010, 2011, we were in the cup with Stoke City. We played West Ham away, and I think we got beat 3-0. And we were 4 points clear of the bottom three at the time. The following week, we were then playing West Ham again in the quarterfinals of the FA Cup. We won that game. So leading up to the quarterfinal game, I think we played 7 games and got 4 points. After that quarterfinal win, obviously, you know, the semi-final is then played at Wembley. After the quarterfinals to the final, because we won the semi-final, we played 7 games and got 12 points.
Mm-hmm.
And we finished comfortably above the relegation zone. And the thing is, when you are a player that's part of a team that's involved in the relegation fight, it's the same mundane things. Oh, we can't afford to lose this game. We've got to win this one. This is a 6-pointer, you know, as people speak. But when you have an FA Cup run, all of a sudden it lifts everybody. I'm not saying players don't give everything on the pitch, but all of a sudden you get to the quarterfinals, you win that quarterfinal. Everybody wants to be in that starting 11 at Wembley. It's what you dream of as a kid. You know, then you get to the FA Cup final, you want to be part of that. And your season can take a real turn for the better. Now, we hear a lot of managers saying, well, you know, we're in a relegation fight and we don't want to risk players, we don't want to risk injuries. Well, if everybody lived the career like that, then nobody would be going out on the football pitch. You look at Bournemouth. Bournemouth are in no danger, in my opinion. I think they're 10 points clear of the relegation zone. They made 11 changes.
Right.
Eddie Howe, he may regret that, he may not. But I just look at it and think to myself, you've got a fantastic opportunity of doing something in the FA Cup. You know, what would you rather have? Someone turn around and go, yeah, you know what, we had a relegation fight and we got out of it, but we didn't do anything in the FA Cup. Look at Wigan. They went on a magnificent FA Cup run. They got relegated, but they won the FA Cup. So, yes, relegation, but then won the FA Cup. So it takes a little bit then away from the relegation. Whereas you have other teams, like I say, it's an upturn. You know, it kickstarts their season. Leicester City is a prime example. Going to Everton, 1-0 down. Ranieri plays a strong team. 1-0 down, come back and win the game 2-1. That will kickstart their season without question. And that's sometimes what it can need. It takes you away from the monotony of a relegation fight week after week, having to scrap for points. It's just something different for the players and for the supporters.
But Danny, we know that clubs prioritize things based on financial reward. So if the FA Cup, for example, carried the winner of the FA Cup goes to the Champions League rather than fourth place, is that a solution to the problem?
My own honest opinion, no. Then you're devaluing then you are devaluing the Champions League. And for me, it's not right. The FA Cup is the biggest and probably the most famous domestic cup competition in world football. Mm-hmm. That should be enough. You know, I had a situation.
No, but that's not, Danny. You know that's not what's happening. I mean, that's
not what's happening. But for me, you shouldn't have to have an incentive to want to do well in the FA Cup. There's no excuse. You know, nobody's saying you're not playing. Let's get this right as well. You're not playing on the Saturday in the FA Cup and then playing in the Tuesday in the league. Look at Manchester United, for example, Mourinho against Reading. He played a very strong team, a very strong team with a lot of first team regulars. They play Hull this week, and then they play Liverpool on Sunday. Do you think Mourinho was looking and going, don't want him to get injured, don't want him to get injured? He could get injured in training. And I just think that it's wrong. It's wrong to do it. And for me, I have a real issue with it because it was something that as a kid you dream about playing in FA Cup finals. My team got to an FA Cup final on 2 occasions. The first one was at Southampton. I was on the bench. Didn't mean anything to me because I wasn't involved. The second one, I couldn't even be involved in it. Didn't play at Wembley in the semi-final. I did my cruise ship 2 weeks before the semi-final. So I missed the semi-final and the final. And that really devastated me at the time. And I just think that it's wrong to devalue the FA Cup like people are doing.
Despite the fact that weekend teams were picked, we've virtually seen no giant killing anymore. So is it fair to say that even Premier League reserve teams, youth teams, or kids are that much better than Championship, League One, League Two teams?
No, I think the difference is if you look back at, when we see the giant killing videos on the TV and things like that, there was a lot made of the Wrexham one against Arsenal. One thing stands out, and this is one of the main reasons there is not the giant killing. Look at the football pitches. That is a huge leveler. Huge leveler. You look at the pitches now, whether it be the Championship, more often than not, they've had good pitches, but you go League One, you go League Two, even conference football, the pitches are immaculate. And that used to be a leveler. That used to be, right, okay, lads, you come in to play at our ground now. The pitch is going to be bobbly. You're not going to be able to play the football that you want to play. That level has gone now because the pitches are beautiful. They're like carpets, even in the lower leagues. So that's why I believe that the chances of an upset are becoming a lot less now because of the standard of the pitches. Not necessarily the players, but that divide, that level of which used to be the football pitches has changed now because they're all beautiful.
How big is the gap, Danny, between a League Two, League One, Championship footballer or a Premiership footballer?
A lot of it comes down to, because what I found during my career is that as I got older, I started to go through the league. So I played in the Championship, played League One. I didn't play League Two, and then I went and played for a local team near me in the national conference.
Mm-hmm. The
one thing I found, the thing that set apart quite a lot of players. Don't get me wrong. There's some top class players in the Premier League. Some world class players, some of the best. Was consistency. That was the big thing.
Yeah.
Your top players are consistent. As I went to play down in the Championship or even League One at times, you would play in a game. And you would look at one of your teammates and you would be like, how are you playing at this level? You should not be playing at this level. You should be playing at least a league or even 2 leagues up in the Premier League. But then you see them the next week. That's the problem. They're so up and down. Whereas the Premier League players, you look at the best players in the Premier League, the consistency is key. And that for me is the big difference. Not so much the ability of an individual, but it's the consistency, the consistency to get an 8 out of 10, a 7 out of 10 week after week. Whereas a lot of the lower league players have the ability to play in the Premier League, but they may give you an 8 out of 10 one week. The next week they may give you a 3. So that's one of the bigger differences for me.
I want to ask you about Pep Guardiola, because he's been getting a lot of attention over the last few weeks, Danny. Very bizarre interview after the 2-1 victory against Burnley. Very strange. Not smart. We talked about this a week or so ago, but
yes.
Am I looking at Pep Guardiola that's saying, I'm finally appreciating how big a job this is at Man City, and maybe 1 or 2 regrets?
I don't think regrets, because I can only go off reading a couple of his books that he has, and also spending a bit of time with him a couple of months ago when they played West Brom away and they beat them 4-0. I think it's an understanding now from him that he probably underestimated the Premier League at the time.
Mm-hmm.
I would probably say that's probably the biggest thing for him. There's no easy games. I know it's a cliche, but there is no easy games in the Premier League. Different teams will give you different problems. I think what he had when he was in La Liga with Barcelona is that he picked up a team that played the Barcelona way, which was Pep Guardiola's way. He had to get rid of a few big characters that he didn't believe could take the team forward, and he brought some through, the likes of Busquets and players like that have gone on to have phenomenal careers and getting the respect and the rewards that they deserve. When he went to Bayern Munich, he picked up a team that had just won everything and just carried on as normal and was successful again. I think the big problem is when he went to Manchester City, I think a lot of people forget this, is they scraped in 4th, I think, on the last day of the season. He's picked up an aging squad as well. Not their last league game against Burnley, but the one before. I think he might actually have been against Liverpool. They had 6 players of the age of 30 or over.
Yeah.
Now, one thing, and it's something that we touched on last week, is that in anything in life, no matter what your job is, whether you're a footballer, whether you're a businessman, any other sports, as you get older, the less open you are to change. So therefore, Guardiola's gone into a football club where he has probably the oldest average squad age that he's ever had, I would say, in my opinion. And he's trying to change these players, and it's very, very difficult, because as I got older, myself personally as a player, and I went to a different football club, if the manager asks you to do something, okay, yeah, you want to try and be adaptable to change, but the older you are, the less you really want to do it. So I think that's a big problem for him as well. And one of the biggest things as well, he didn't really have it in the league, and because they were so dominant in the Bundesliga as well with Bayern Munich, I don't think his teams were vulnerable too much to the counter-attack. But if you look in the Champions League, look at Bayern Munich last season, look at their defeat to, I think it was Atletico Madrid. Look at the defeat to Atletico Madrid. They were counter-attacked magnificently well by Atletico Madrid. But that's something that Pep Guardiola hasn't really had to deal with in his domestic football. You come over to the Premier League, and that's what it's all about now. The more possession you have, he's a possession-based manager. Everybody knows that. But in the Premier League, the more possession-based you are, the more open you're going to be to the counter-attack. And he's finding that now. The Premier League is the fastest league in the world. Second comes the Bundesliga. But because Bayern Munich was so dominant, I don't think they had to fear so much the counter-attack against them.
But, Danny, when Mourinho went to United, one of the big question marks was, will he play kids? Will he give young players a chance? Will Marcus Rashford play? Everyone was very critical of him. City have spent untold millions on their academy. They get praise up and down the country for the way they run their academy. Yet Guardiola is not exactly taking the kids out of their academy and putting them in, and yet somehow is getting away without being criticised for saying, well, if you've got older players, one of two things: either you don't have the courage to play these young players, or despite all these millions that City are spending, that academy still not producing players that are ready for their first team.
I think there's probably maybe 2-3 players at Manchester City you could probably look at and think, right, okay, they could possibly handle it in the Premier League. But I think all the money that they're spending now in the academy, and we've seen the things that they've done, the academy setup it is unbelievable. One of the best in the world, the way that they've got it. They've got their own little stadium and everything, and it's brilliant. And I think that's going to be something that comes to fruition probably in the next 4 or 5 years. I think there's players still coming through now that are starting to adapt and start to come through. But I think when you look at Guardiola, the opportunities and the players that he's brought through at certain football clubs, the youngsters that he's given the opportunity to, you wouldn't turn around and say that he's against youth. I don't think there's any doubt about that. I just think that for me at the moment at Manchester City, there's probably 2 things. There's probably, the first one is there's probably players coming through that aren't quite ready to play for Manchester City at the moment. And number 2, I think the position that Guardiola finds himself in, I don't think he's at a luxury point in his career where he can say, right, I'm going to put young players in. Because there's a lot of pressure on him at the moment as a manager. And unfortunately, we are seeing less and less youngsters coming through. Now, the one thing I would say is that there's a big thing in this country. Okay, this is a question that I want to ask you. There's a big thing in this country at the moment in the Premier League. Everybody's saying youngsters aren't getting the opportunity. So-and-so isn't getting his chance. He's having to move, blah, blah, blah. And there's imports coming in, and they're not as good as the younger players. It was a question that I threw out probably about 8 to 10 months ago. I'll ask you the same question. Let's take the current top 6. We look at Tottenham, we look at Chelsea, Manchester United, Liverpool, Manchester City, and Arsenal. Okay, so we take them 6 teams. Over the last 5 years, right? How many players have been released free of charge from them 6 football clubs and joined another Premier League team?
Released free? Oh, I can't think of any.
Let's say released at 2021. Okay. Now, bear in mind they've been brought up at top 6 clubs, so everybody knows they've had the right grounding. Everybody knows they've been brought up the right way. They've been brought up the Premier League way, so to speak, to know how everything is run. How many players would you say Can you think of any from them top 6 clubs
No.
that have been released? I'm not talking about your Cleverleys or your Welbecks or players like that. I'm on about players that were just seen as not good enough for a Manchester United, for a Liverpool, that have been released by, say, a lower third Premier League team.
I honestly can't think of any, which leads me to another question. Are academies overrated?
Yes. Yeah. Oh, we could have a whole show on this. The whole situation with academy football is completely wrong. Completely
Why?
wrong. We have a big thing in this country at the moment where we talk about leaders coming through. So
Yeah.
in the past you look at it, your John Terrys, your Jamie Carragher's, your Steven Gerrard, your Frank Lampards, that some may be vocal, some may lead by example. We're not seeing them coming through now. We talk about centre-backs. Everybody wants to produce a ball-playing centre-back. Where are the English centre-backs that would run for a brick wall for you? Demand better. John Terry is the last of that breed. What is happening is we are going into academies now. I've seen it myself. You go into an academy, you're not given any responsibilities. You're not given any responsibilities. When I was younger, people say, "Oh, well, you want to go back to the old days." Mm-hmm. You're an apprentice. As a first year, you had jobs to do. If you didn't do your job, you were in trouble. So therefore, you take them responsibilities onto the football pitch. I did England under 21s last year in the Euros, where I don't think they got out of the group, and they conceded a goal. And I looked at all the players and I thought to myself, they could actually pull down their socks in a minute, take their mobile phone out of their shin pads and ring their agent and ask them what to do next. But that's the big problem. What you are doing, I'll tell you another thing as well, which I would quite happily do. If you and me sat down with 10 18-year-old players in the Premier League now, okay, 18, 19-year-olds, and we said to them, listen, do us a favor, write down on a piece of paper how much you are earning now, okay? 10 players from some of the top clubs in the Premier League. Write down on a piece of paper how much you're earning. Me and you won't look at how much you're earning. 10 years from now, come back and tell us what your best contract was. 90%, I guarantee you 90% of their envelopes will have the best contract. Players are getting the best contract now at the age of 18, 19, resting on the laurels, get to 22, 23, it's too late, you stagnate. And that's the problem that we're having now.
So how do you fix that problem? I mean, there's an obvious solution, we don't pay them, but the problem is the market's dictating what these kids are getting, and everybody wants young talent, so everyone's willing to pay for it. I was talking to a United coach last week, and he was talking about one of the young players. I won't name him. He hasn't made a first team appearance yet. Young central defender, bright young talent. He got a contract, and the day after he got a contract, he showed up at Old Trafford in a top of the line Mercedes, and was bollocked for it essentially, and was told to either park it well away from Old Trafford or don't bring it in at all, right? And I'm thinking to myself, how does a kid who's never played for the first team yet make the type of money that would allow you to go out and buy a £90,000 car and still stay motivated? It must be people who have a special type of personality, whether they make that money or not, will stay motivated. So surely the PFA must get involved, Danny, and say, okay, I'll tell you what, more education must be given to these kids on this very topic, that if you don't, A, put money away when you get your first contract, and B, realize that the death of you will be a lack of motivation after you get this contract. Is enough being done to educate these kids?
Probably not, but I think it is very difficult when they're given so much money. I think the problem that you have, and it's never going to happen in the Premier League, because all teams would probably have to agree to it, is that you have a level of what you earn. So it'd be very difficult to do. But what I would say is, right, okay, 16 to 18, you earn a certain amount of money, okay, like your old apprenticeship. When you hit 18, you sign professional forms, and you have another level where you're at. you get involved with the first team squad. If you're on the bench, I don't know, 5 times, you then get a bonus. You then make 5 starts, you get another bonus. After you've made 15 starts, the club rips the contract up and gives you whatever you want. Because there are players out there that have made the debut at 17, 18, 19, and there's been no looking back. Good luck to them. They deserve everything that they get. Is that if you're going to give young players at 18, 15, 20,000 pound a week, and you give them a 4-year contract, their career is going to be as good as over at 22. Because between 18 and 22, they may never play a first team game, but they've rested on their laurels. So all of a sudden, a player is at a Premier League club, gets 15, 20,000 pound a week, right? At the age of 22, the Premier League club goes, listen, you're no good for us now. We don't want you. You're on a free. A Championship club comes in and goes, we'll give you 5,000 pound a week. What's that player going to do? He's probably going to go, I've just been getting paid 15, 20,000 pounds for 4 years. And you think I'm going to come and play for you for 5,000? Not happening. And then players are falling out of the system. So for me, it's a real big issue. The other thing that you could do is say to players, right, okay, this is the money you're getting, but out of this money, you're only going to see X amount of it now. The rest is put in a trust for you when you retire.
Danny, I'm thinking about...
That's another way to look at it.
I'm thinking about players like Phil Jones, Jack Wilshere, Smalling, Shaw, Oxlade-Chamberlain, Walcott, exceptional young English talent that should have went on to be wonder players. For whatever happened, for whatever reason, that development stagnated. Do you think that's the reason?
I'm not talking about that type of player, to be honest. I'm talking about the lesser players. Listen, the players that you just mentioned.
Well, then why are English players? Because if I look at English players, so much potential. Are we either overrating them, or why are they not fulfilling their potential?
As in terms of the national team?
In terms of in general, like Phil Jones was called the new Duncan Edwards by Ferguson.
I know, which
right?
I don't
which
think
was unfair on him. Right?
Yes.
Or Jack Wilshere was in our Arsenal first team at 16, and now he's on loan at Bournemouth. I know he's had injury problems, right? Oxlade-Chamberlain, Walcott, both left Southampton at 17, thereabouts. Exceptional young talents. Luke Shaw is in a fight for his United career right now. A £30 million defender at 19. Why are they? I feel like if they were German or Spanish, they would be fulfilling their potential. Why can't we get these players to that world-class, consistent world-class level?
I think there's a huge expectation level on them. Huge expectation levels. I don't think there's any doubt about that. You know, you are the minute we've seen it. You know, we've seen players all of a sudden come on in the Premier League, score a goal. All of a sudden, it's like, right, okay, it's the back page of the newspaper. He plays for this country, but England want them to come and play for him. And I'm like, whoa, let's just calm down. We over exaggerate on players early on, and that puts a huge amount of pressure on them. There's no doubt about that. That's where I stand with them type of things 100%. I think that all of a sudden, I think in this country, if a player is seen as having fulfillment, starting to really show what he's capable of, unless he goes like that consistently, he's failed.
This worries me about Rashford.
He's very, very...
Because...
No, see,
months he's away to the Euros. I don't want that to happen to him. What's going wrong? That's I suppose.
I see. I'm less worried about Rashford because he, like you say, you know, he had a phenomenal year last year. Went away with England. He's come back, and it's not been so easy for him this year.
Yeah.
So people aren't talking about the wonder kid. Where's he disappeared to? People are saying. In my opinion, when they signed Ibrahimovic and everybody was saying, oh, what's that going to do to Rashford? And I was like, that's going to do him the world of good. Imagine how much he's going to learn from Ibrahimovic.
Take the pressure off him.
The pressure is completely off him. Nobody's writing him off now. People are saying, instead of people going, oh, Rashford was just a flash in a pan, people are actually saying, tell you what, Ibrahimovic is playing in front of him. But imagine how much he's learning from Ibrahimovic. No one is coming out and saying, oh, another England hope that's fallen by the wayside. And I think there's too much pressure, far too much pressure on individual players in this country, without doubt. Whereas I think in other countries, players are allowed to develop without anybody putting too much hysteria on them. But I think, like I said, we talked previously about Rooney. We big players up and put them on this pedestal, and then a lot of the time can't wait to knock them when the first signs of weakness happen. Whereas a footballer, unless you are the cream of the cream, unless you are the top person, you are going to have ups and downs as an individual player. The problem is, though, is that for me, for example, okay, I was a player that would be up and down, up and down, up and down. You have good games, you have bad games. The biggest thing that some of these players that you've just mentioned is that the reason they go to a club like Manchester United, the reason they go to a club like Arsenal or Liverpool or Manchester City, whatever it might be, is because their career has been on a constant up. Okay, so because it's been on a constant up, you could bring Guardiola into this in a managerial situation as well. It's a lot more difficult for them to deal with a little bit of a drop in form or a little bit of a drop in results as a manager because they've never had it before. Whereas like someone like myself or a manager that's used to being up and down, you know how to deal with it. But some of these players that we're talking about probably didn't have their first dodgy spell until they got to 23, 24, whatever it might be. So it's very, very hard then to deal with it because everybody has been telling you how much of a magnificent player you are. All of a sudden you have a bad few games. And it's like, you're not that player that we thought you were. When in all reality you are. You're just having a bit of a blip. But because you've never been there before, you've never had that bad spell, you don't know how to deal with it. And it's tough for them.
I want to move on to an interesting topic, Danny. As we look at the evolution of football and some things that have changed, if you look back 1999 beyond, Premier League had wonderful wide players. Now, if you look at wingers, they're almost inside forwards. They're almost tucking in. They're no longer the guys that sit on the chalk on the boots and get down the line, put the ball in. If you look at Mourinho's Chelsea team, where Hazard and Schürrle, he likes those wingers that will tuck in, cut across, Pedro, and now he's doing it at United. Are we looking at wingers in the Premier League completely changing?
Yeah, I think I go back 10 years ago, and like every week, if I was playing fullback, you were playing against an exceptional winger, and it was tough because they wanted to get you one-on-one. They wanted to get down the outside of you, and they wanted to get crosses into the box to score goals. I think there's two things really. I think you talk about a system change, so therefore you're out-and-out wingers. People say, why are there no more out-and-out wingers around? Why we're not seeing the next Ryan Giggs? Why we're not seeing the Kinchelskis? Why we're not seeing a Harry Kewell? Why we're not seeing an Overmars and players like that? It's because teams don't play with wingers now. So what's the point of developing wingers if you're not actually going to play with wingers? Your wingers now are essentially fullbacks. That's why fullbacks are going for 30. That's why fullbacks are going for £30 million. I look at Walker and I look at Rose at Tottenham. If those two players were to be sold, they would probably be going in excess of 35, 40 million pounds. Now, 10 years ago, nobody would ever say a fullback is going to go for that money. But they're so important now. For me, I've said it all along, and people say, oh, you're just stuck in the old school. 4-4-2 for me is the best system around. Will beat any other system if it's played correctly. You get 2v1s down the side. But another thing as well, what is the point now? If you're going to play with out-and-out wingers, it's all about getting at the fullback, getting crosses into the box. Most teams play now with one centre forward. So for a start, you've not got two centre forwards getting into the box. You haven't a lot of the time got that box-to-box central midfielder getting into the box. You haven't got the opposite winger getting into the box as well. So you're crossing the ball, and there may only be one stroke two players in there of your team that are actually going to try and get on the end of the cross. We're seeing a lot of, like you just said, we're having inverted wingers, so a right-footed playing on the left and a left-footed playing on the right. So therefore, everything's coming inside. Whereas now, we saw it last season with Leicester City in particular. If a team could play 4-4-2 and get it right, I think there's a lot of joy to be had. Atletico Madrid last season came so close to winning the Champions League, 4-4-2. Leicester City 4-4-2. The story of the story of recent history in the Premier League. But it's all about getting it right. And the simple fact is that wingers are not very dominant now because there's not a need for them, unfortunately.
So when I look at a system like Chelsea's that has three at the back, two wing backs, surely the answer to beating Chelsea is to having good width.
Yes. Yeah. You would say that, but
because you need
really
to pin the fullbacks back, right?
You need to pin the fullbacks, but and this is where at the start of the season, everybody was saying what team's going to win the Premier League, and I think the top six teams are much of a muchness in terms of quality in the squad. You know, I think there's very little to decide between all the six squads. I think they're all very, very strong. What we're seeing now, if I take two recent games, so we'll look at Chelsea in a second. So we look at Liverpool, Manchester City. Everybody thought Klopp was going to come out and go bang, the high press at Manchester City. We're going to get at you. We're not going to let you play out from the back because that's what you want to do. Guardiola preempted this and said, right, we know you're going to press us high. We're going to go long over you. Klopp was 2 steps ahead. He didn't squeeze. He didn't press high. He let Manchester City have the ball. And Manchester City were like, whoa, what do we do?
What do we do?
Fast forward to Chelsea, Tottenham, and the way they went about things. For me, it was a tactical masterclass from Pochettino. Now, bear with me because this was my understanding of the game. So Chelsea played their usual 3-4-3 as they like to play. What Tottenham did, and it was brilliant, they played a 3-4-2-1. So what they had, everybody knows that the defensive key to Chelsea is Matic and Kante. Mm-hmm. Okay, so they create a shield in front of that back three, allows the wing backs to go forward, go and do what they want to do. What Tottenham did, Tottenham said, right, what we're going to do, we are going to make your 2 fullbacks, we're going to drag them back. If you want to attack, we have 2 centre-backs or 3 centre-backs that are comfortable going into the wide position. So if they get beyond our wing-backs, being Walker and Rose, we know our 3 centre-backs can take care of them. What was happening then is that the amount of times that Walker and Rose got on the wrong side of Chelsea's 2 wing-backs, who had to come out and then cover the wing-backs? Matic and Kante.
Yep.
The two goals were identical. So what happened was the 2 behind Harry Kane was stretching the game. Dele Alli, but in particular Eriksen, allowed Kane to stretch the game. He took up the positions that had been vacated by Matic for both of the goals because on the first one, Matic had gone out to cover Alonso, who'd been caught out with Walker going forward. So the ball was played to Eriksen. Eriksen crossed the ball. And on the second goal, because Kane was stretching the 3 centre-backs for Chelsea, Matic had to drop. So therefore, he couldn't get out to Eriksen, who crossed the balls in. So for me, everybody says like, oh, Tottenham have shown how you can beat Chelsea. Yeah, okay, everybody knows you can beat Chelsea with a 3-4-2-1. Not everybody's got Tottenham starting 11. Right. That's the difference. That's a huge difference.
On Dele Alli, how good is Dele Alli?
I think he's getting better and better all the time. I think he's becoming a player now that on the big games more than ever, he's showing up. We've seen it with the goals that he scored against Chelsea. And he's a player that is consistently getting better. And the thing is with Tottenham, they're a young squad as well. In the summer, I said, if the top 6 teams, you know, the probable top 6 teams of this season signed no players, Tottenham would be the only team that were better than last season. Yeah, because what they've got, they're okay. It was a poor, well, not a nice experience for them last season, but they had a young squad that are growing that will have gained a lot from last season. Pochettino's very clever. People talk about the world-class players that are coming in. Some of the best business that Pochettino does, he's not bringing the best players in. He's not bringing the world-class players in because what he has a core of players that are very similar in age, probably very good friends off the pitch, and he doesn't want to break that dressing room harmony because that's what can happen sometimes when you bring the big players in. And he's done that, but he's got some outstanding players. You look at the spine of the team, Alderweireld, Vertonghen, Dembele, who for me, with Dele Alli, is Tottenham's most important player. He is an outstanding player. You've got Dyer, you've got Wanyama, who's coming doing a magnificent job. Then Dele Alli and Harry Kane. That is a formidable spine, and add Hugo Lloris to it. I always say the spine is the strongest part of the team. The branches either side, you can fill them in to a certain extent. But the spine of that team is incredible, and it's a team that's young and is only going to get better and stronger. My only one concern for Tottenham, though, is after this season, next season they're going to be playing every game at Wembley at home, and that could be a real problem for them.
As we saw in the Champions League, it was a disaster for them. Last question, Danny, I want to ask you about the expansion of the World Cup into a 48-team World Cup. 2 tips of opinions on this. I'm not sure if you saw the letter that San Marino wrote Thomas Muller about Thomas Muller said it was totally pointless playing them. And there's an argument that the game doesn't belong to the big teams. The game belongs to everybody. And by making the World Cup accessible for smaller nations, not only does it inspire kids in those nations, I would imagine there's kids in Iceland right now desperate to play football because of the success of the national team at the Euros. Now, Iceland would have made it in any Euro the way they qualified, but for smaller nations, Danny, competing at these tournaments has always meant a lot. But maybe when you dilute it, it doesn't mean as much because it's just another set. It's essentially a second round of qualification before you get into the real tournament. Do you agree with this?
I think it has its plus and its minuses. I think a plus for expanding it is that, like you say, you're going to get your so-called lesser nations that are going to get the opportunity. Let's be honest. Your quarterfinalists and your semi-finalists, they're going to be the best teams. That's never going to change. I just think when you look at it from a smaller nation's point of view, it's an opportunity for them to play against some of the best players in the world, to play at some of the best stadiums in the world and things like that, which they would never ever get. Towards the end of my career, I played I think 3 games for Gibraltar. Players that are policemen, they're firemen, they're customs officers, they're postmen and things like that. They could only dream of things like that. Now, you go into a pitch and people say, oh, well, what's the point in playing it because you're beating them 5, 6, 7-0? Hang on a second. Why? And what does that have to do with anything? It's an opportunity for these players that they would never, ever get. Now, let's not forget, in the Premier League, we're seeing teams getting beat 5-0, 6-0 as well. So what does that mean? Does that mean that the Premier League should only be allowed to have teams that don't get beat 5-6-0 in games? For me, it's something that I think there's a lot of snobbery in it.
Yeah,
if you're saying that the smaller nations shouldn't be involved. At the end of the day, when you get to a World Cup final or a Euros final, you're going to see the best 2 teams in the final in that tournament. And the likelihood is that they're not going to be a small nation. They're not going to be a so-called lesser nation. They're going to have been knocked out before it. But don't take away that opportunity for them, because, like I say, for me, it's pure snobbery. Leicester City proved that last season in the Premier League. They were one of the favourites to be relegated and went on and won the Premier League. They had no right to win the Premier League. And what that's done is given everybody an opportunity to see that maybe an underdog can go forward and create something special.
Well, I just think it's harder and harder to see a Denmark or the Greece today. The odds are continuously stacked in the favour of the big boys. So for me, this is very much like this European Super League discussion, where we're going to separate ourselves from everybody else, and the big boys are going to go do what they want. I think once football goes down that road, it's a death knell to the game, because you're going to kill off you're going to kill off lower league football, and football does not belong to the big teams. Football belongs to me, to the fans, and then is there what makes big teams. So I think it's important that and it's not just about having 48 teams. Stop having World Cups in countries that are not friendly to human beings. Danny,
I think
go ahead, man.
I think just before we go, one thing is that we look at 92, 96, 2000, 2004, 2008, 2012, 2016. I would struggle to tell you the nations that won the majority of them tournaments. I can tell you one in 2004, though, and 1992. Denmark and Greece, because they're the ones that stand out. They're the ones that stand long in the memory, because it's the unexpected. It's the joy of seeing a team that should be nowhere near the final actually get to the final and win it. And for me, that's the beauty of football at times. The underdog come into the fore and go in, tell you what, we don't care what nation you are, we're gonna beat you. And that, for me, it's nice to see that every now and then. So don't take it away.
Funny you say that. 88 Cup final will stick in the mind of just about every football fan. Wimbledon winning the FA Cup final. A team that came from nowhere winning the FA Cup final. Unbelievable achievement. And in many ways, it gives everybody inspiration in their own lives to say anything's possible.
Exactly.
Anything's possible. So for me, the part of the romance of football is to make sure that 1,000,000 to 1 shot of the underdog. In American sports try to make sure we take out any chance for an underdog to be successful. And to me, that's when sports become strictly a business, and I don't like that. So, Danny, mate, as always, thanks very much. Thanks for all of you who tuned in and watched this live. Thanks for all of you who downloaded. Always a pleasure, mate, and I will catch up with you next week, pal.
Cheers, mate. Take care. Have a good week.
Cheers, Dan. See you, mate. Bye. Bye, everyone.
All right.